Hi, welcome to the next unit, which is progressivism. This video is just going to introduce who the progressives were in a general sense and go through some examples of progressive political reform. We're going to be cutting this unit quite a bit, so we're going to get just basically the main idea here and talking about some of the political processes through Roosevelt, Taft, and Wilson and their progressive ideas and the differences between them, and then moving on to imperialism, which happens at the same time. Okay, so progressivism. Who are they? Who are the progressives? What do they do? And the great question is, for the first one, who are they? We don't know. Historians basically think that everyone was and was not a progressive. It depends on who you are, who you're looking at, what perspective they're taking. It's a good old-fashioned, debates among history. Who are the progressives, and what do they want to do? Now, in general, though, progressivism is using expert scientific management, right, to fix the problems of the Gilded Age. Okay, and it basically looks at okay, look at the most efficient thing in America, right? The corporate structure. These wildly successful corporations, streamlined for efficiency, and let's model our government off of that to make our government more efficient and effective at solving these problems, right? Excuse me. Anyway, they take that model and they apply it for whatever goal there was. Now, where the question of who they were comes from is in who's at the moment applying that thought process and for what goal are they going to do? And so at times you see this being wielded by the people, right? The average everyday person against special interests and really saying, okay, we have this problem, and this problem is child labor, or this problem is corporations using spoiled meat and selling it. And our solution is expert management, the Meat Inspection Act, the government modeled after a corporation, stopping bad meat, right? Or ending child labor. And then in beginning public education, right? And so it's like, how do we, solve this problem? And then on the other end, though, it's this new middle class that emerges, this management class from that corporate structure that emerges to solidify themselves and protect their new status, right? So it appeases the lower class and bridges that gap between the upper class, right? So it says, okay, well, you can't exploit the workers as much upper class, but lower class, you can't be doing violent strikes. So, and it kind of meets in the middle there to secure themselves. Other historians argue that it's the old elite that loses their power during industrialization, looking for a way to keep it, and they keep it by becoming those managers, right? By being that new management in the government, right? And then lastly, there are those who argue that it's simply just big business and those in power, people with money and power, trying to keep their money and power by regulating themselves. And when you create regulation, you take that existing structure and you regulate it, and you don't allow new people to join in. And so if you have a big business, right, that's being regulated, you can regulate that big business and keep it protected from new competition through those regulations. And basically what we see is progressivism is used for all of these things at some point in time. It's the new scientific management, the trust the experts thing. It's that new thing that people will use, that tool people use to get what they want, right? And so progressivism is hard to pin down as to who's using those tools and when, and for what goal they're doing that. And this is why historians tend to disagree. And then they go even further, is FDR's New Deal the extension of progressivism, or is it something different, right? And that always depends too on your perspective and that. But typically we take progressivism from the 1900s, Teddy Roosevelt's presidency, early 1900s through the end of World War I and Wilson's presidency, right? And we classify the progressive age as then, when all these new things were coming. So things that get classified as progressivism include the Prohibition movement, as well as women's suffrage. right? And some of the other political developments we're going to talk about today. Okay, so that's who the progressives were and what their goal is. The big idea is scientific management in the corporate structure. And we got some proof of that here, okay? So we're gonna look at one of the major progressive movers and shakers, Robert La Follette, who was the governor of Wisconsin and then later a senator, a noted anti-imperialist, probably one of the bigger like arguments for progressivism as the lower class movement. But then again, La Follette himself comes from that new middle class. Okay, anyway, so basically what he does and what you're seeing in this reading here that you should be doing as well. And if you're a random internet person who stumbled across this video, sorry. Okay. Anyway, so you're reading here about his direct primary, right? Which gives people the ability to nominate their candidates. Okay, so it's putting power in the hands of the people. So that's not a populist progressivism. Okay. Okay. Anyway, but in the goal of making the government more efficient, right? The scientific method right here that you can see, okay? It's basically structuring the local governments as if they were corporations, right? Like in a corporation, you have a board that represents the shareholders, right? And then that board appoints people like the CEO, right? And that would be like your mayor, okay? Now, or your city manager, right? In either of these systems, okay? And then that CEO can appoint managers for their departments, okay? Or in the other sense, you have like a CFO, a CEO, COO, and like they would be your C class, right? Okay, so in general though, you have managers who have employees, right? And that board structure, same thing. And whether it's the commission form or the council manager form, you're structuring it as if it is a corporation to create efficiency in your local governments, right? Okay, now La Follette's Laboratory of Democracy, right? His Wisconsin idea is using experts to regulate the economy and society. And those experts, right, would be that old elite, those college professors, or that new middle class elite, right? It depends on what you're talking about. But anyway, then you also have the people who actually structure these regulations being the upper class. Now, the point is, though, you have that expert idea of experts who manage, right? Experts who manage, and then you rely on trusting those experts there. Okay, so as a result of these things, you get the direct election of senator, the more democratic initiative, referendum, recall, direct primaries, but you also get that power in the hands of the experts, right? So a lot of ways, these things were to get out the entrenched politicians who were corrupt, and then you put new people in who support La Follette and progressivism, and then they elect the experts. It's a constant, turning over of power in our democratic system. Okay. So anyway, the questions that you have to answer, students, you'll see them in those readings there, right? Hopefully I've covered it, but how does this reflect the ideas of progressivism? We're using scientific management and expert control. Okay. Hopefully you can understand how these things are arguing for different views of progressivism. Okay. In general, some questions for you to just kind of think about and do the readings with those. But to summarize, progressivism is expert management, scientific management structured in the corporate style. Its effects are reform of our society in that trust the expert style, right? So it might look on the surface like it's populism, like it's people against special interests, but its effect is to actually take people, right, and not give them power, but give power to the certain group called experts. And now, whether or not you think that's a good thing or not, that will tell you a lot about your modern day politics, especially as it relates to the coronavirus. And nice time for the cough. Okay. But you'll hear that phrase a lot, and how much do we trust our government institutions that were very much a result of progressive thinking. Something for you to consider there. Okay. Email me if you have questions, students. I know I got a lot of people out right now, so